Welcome to the presentation on the Kemp, Morrison and Ross design model, completed by Shayla Heidner. Let's take a look at the theorists who developed the model. 3 men contributed to this design: Stephen M. Ross, Gary R. Morrison, and Gerald E. Kemp. The design process is outlined in their book, Designing Effective Instruction. Ross earned a doctorate from Pennsylvania State University in the field of educational psychology. He went on to work as a research scientist and professor at Johns Hopkins University. His work on instructional design and education technology can be found in 6 textbooks and over 120 journal articles. Morrison earned a doctorate from Indiana University in the field of instructional systems technology. He has contributed as an instructional designer for a variety of schools and companies in addition to his work as a professor, including courses in instructional design at Old Dominion University. Morrison is also well published with over 100 articles in his field. Kemp earned a doctorate from Indiana University as well in the field of audiovisual education. He worked for over 30 years at San Jose State University as a professor of instructional technology, as well as the coordinator of instructional development. Kemp has also contributed to 4 books on the topics of training and technology. We will now move on to the implementation of the model. Here we will present the necessary 9 elements of the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design. While we discuss them in the provided order, it is important to note that the beauty of this model is that it is by design non-linear. This means that we can begin with any of the 9 elements. We will look at this in more depth momentarily with use of the visual model as well. We begin with the instructional problem. We wish to clearly establish a problem that needs to be solved or an instructional need to be met. In addition, we will determine our goals for the design. One difference in the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross method than others, like the Dick and Carey model, is that it encourages the designer to determine if instruction will be the best fix for the problem. Akbalat states, the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model suggests both instructional and non-instructional solutions. Our next element is to examine learner characteristics. The basis of this is to determine who we wish to teach in order to develop our design appropriately for said group. Here again, we have a difference from other ID models. The Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model puts a focus on the learners, or as Akbalat puts it, it considers the instruction from the perspective of the learners. This can be a great benefit, especially when creating for students of a certain level, as we are given the opportunity to address their specific needs due to age, knowledge level, or other criteria in our design plan. Brown and Green state, Morrison, Ross, and Kemp approach learner analysis by examining the learner's general characteristics, entry competencies, and learning styles. They recommend special attention be paid to the needs of the culturally diverse learners as well as learners with disabilities. We now look to identify the content and complete a task analysis. This step is considered crucial in the design process. The following excerpt is taken from Brown and Green discussing this step in the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model. A task analysis solves 3 problems for an instructional designer. 1. It defines the content required to solve the problem. 2. Because this process forces the subject matter expert to work through each individual step, subtle steps are more easily identified. And 3. During this process, the designer has the opportunity to view the content from the learner's perspective. Using this perspective, the designer can often gain insight into appropriate teaching strategies. Our 4th concept is to identify instructional objectives. As in the example given later in this presentation, this step can take our objectives and refine them into actual clear concepts and goals. As Kemp, Morrison, and Ross state in their text, the instructional objectives specify exactly what the learner must master. We also have the opportunity to sequence the content. Kemp, Morrison, and Ross state that this allows the efficient ordering of content in such a way as to help the learner achieve the objectives in an efficient and effective manner. Our next concept is to design the instructional strategies for mastery of content. Kemp, Morrison, and Ross explain this method is to translate the instructional design plan into a unit of instruction. This means determining how we will communicate the objectives to our specific learners. What methods will be most effective? We now come across the actual planning and development of instruction. Here, the designer uses what they have obtained in previous parts of the process to culminate in their actual instructional piece. The next concept deals with evaluation. How can we measure what has been learned? How can we determine if our goals have been met? Are some of the questions the instructional designer may ask when addressing this element. We will see in the visual that Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model has two types of evaluation, formative and summative. Formative deals with the learner, developing a method of evaluation that allows the designer to measure in some way if the learning goals have been achieved. Summative is an evaluation of the actual design. Kemp, Morrison, and Ross state, formative evaluation is most valuable when conducted during development and tryouts. It should be performed early in the process before valuable time and resources are wasted. The last element of the 9 presented by Brown and Green is to select the resources and learning activities to be used. However, in the visual model, this concept is not represented and is likely clumped into instructional strategies. Instead, the model includes designing the message, which Kemp, Morrison, and Ross define as the pattern of words and pictures we create to communicate with our learners. Again, the process is flexible and fluid. We can interpret it in many different ways. It is up to the instructional designer to determine which steps are appropriate for their design and in which order to address each element. As Akbalet states, the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model claims that not all 9 elements are required for all instructional design processes, while on the other hand, the Dick and Carey model claims that each component is critical and none should be skipped. Let's now take a look at the visual representation of the model. Visually, Kemp, Morrison, and Ross present the model with an ovular representation. It is intentional, as unlike other models, there is no specific linear progression. Any of the 9 elements may happen at any time in the instructional design process. The Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design is at its essence an expansion of the ADDIE model. As Brown and Green state, it is intended to guide the instructional designer through the ADDIE process. Let us quickly review the steps associated. A. Analyze. D. Design. D. Develop. I. Implement. And E. Evaluate. Now let's see how the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design incorporates each of these. We analyze the instructional problem, the learner characteristics, the task, and the instructional objectives. We design the content sequencing, the instructional strategies, and the message. We develop the instruction, and clearly implementation and evaluation are also represented in the visual. As the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design model is an extension of the ADDIE process, as Brown and Green state, scholars generally agree that ADDIE is an illustration of the essential steps of the instructional design or development process. As discussed earlier, this model differs from others such as the Dick and Carey model as it is non-linear and does not provide a specific order. Thus, it can be applied in instructional design for teaching and learning much more easily and fluently with a great degree of flexibility. An instructional designer can begin at any point, including a situation in which some steps or information has already been gathered or given to them, and continue the process seamlessly with this model. Moore and Knowlton give an excellent example of how to apply the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model of instructional design in an article entitled Students as Library Detectives and Books as Clues. In this example, Moore and Knowlton make the following statement. The Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model is represented as an oval, which is meant to convey flexibility and discourage a linear, sequential, and mechanistic approach to design. The flexibility of the model made it a particularly strong choice as an instructional systems design model to be used in a school setting. They go on to state, one criticism of instructional systems design is that it serves as a recipe for design. However, the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design model is far more powerful in its flexibility than the generic ADDIE model. They point out how they were able to move through the steps fluently, spending more time on components they deemed most important and lightly touching or altogether skipping some portions that didn't adhere to their instructional needs. They conclude by stating, instructional systems design is far more of a flexible tool than many would suggest, and thus more appropriate as a method for creating instruction for K-12 school students than many teachers believe. In Students as Library Detectives and Books as Clues, Moore and Knowlton address the following problem. The elementary school in which the first author works was forced to eliminate 2 school librarian positions. This left the school with a problem. Who would keep the library organized, completing tasks such as reshelving books and organizing the bookshelves? They decide to address the problem by developing an instructional design to teach students the librarian's tasks. The article clearly walks through each of the steps in details. It allows us to see how easily the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross model can be applied to both develop instruction and enrich learning. I encourage you to look over the article yourself, especially if you are interested in the application of the model as it clearly defines the entire process. It can be found by searching the ERIC system in the JHU Library database. I have also attached a PDF copy of the article to this presentation. We conclude this presentation with a short 2-minute video clip retrieved from YouTube on the Kemp, Morrison, and Ross design model. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy.
Scotty, I need your help. You know how to put things together, right?
Aye, Captain.
After that mysterious alien wiped out everyone's memories, we need to teach them how to fly the ship again.
Aye, Captain.
Scotty, I have no idea how to design instruction. Which model should we use?
Well, Captain, we can always use the Dick and Carey model.
I'm not sure that will work. I think we need a model that is more learner-centered. And I'm not an experienced instructional designer. I think the Dick and Carey model is too much work. I also don't have time for an extensive front-end analysis. What are my other options, Scotty?
How about the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp model, Captain?
Tell me more about it, Scotty.
Well, the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp model takes the learner into account throughout the design process, not just at the beginning like Dick and Carey. You don't need a lot of experience as an instructional designer to use it, and it is better for us since we just need a few hours of instruction to get the ship flying again.
I like it so far, Scotty. Is it flexible? Can't we change it if we need to?
Aye, Captain. The iterative process makes this model appealing to teachers. Also, each element is independent from the others.
What are the elements you speak of?
Well, some of the elements are the same ones as in the Dick and Carey model. The difference is that they do not need to be considered in order. The 9 elements are instructional problems, learner characteristics, task analysis, instructional objectives, content sequencing, instructional strategies, designing the message, instructional delivery, and evaluation instruments, but not all 9 elements are required for all products.
I really like that this model has a more holistic approach than Dick and Carey. And I don't need to create a whole instructional system.
Aye, Captain. This model is much better to use on individual lessons.
Well, Scotty, I think we've found the perfect design model. Now get to work getting this module created.
Damn it, Jim. I'm an engineer, not an instructional designer.